currently on page 5 in the gold packet. This is example 1, part B. This one asks you to write an equation that will relate the miles driven to the number of gallons of gas. And we had a conversation in class today about what equations look like. A lot of kids thought that problems like this were equations. But these are all what are called expressions. And equations are when you have an equal sign in an equation. So like 2 times 4 equals 8 is an equation. 5 plus 7 equals 12 is an equation. But those are arithmetic expressions, number equations. And last year in 6th grade, you guys started to work with algebraic equations. And actually, you've been working with these for a really long time. I mean, when you were little, you used to have to figure out the answer to things like that, and that's an equation. And you were solving it by finding out what went in the circle. And then eventually, you started to be introduced to more complex equations and get things like this. And we talked about the process that we're going to be using. It's in module 3, so we've got a while to go before we get there. But there are lots of different equations. 2x plus 15 equals negative 32. We'll eventually be doing something like that. And then when you get to 8th grade, they start doing, you know, pretty complex ones. And you start solving stuff like that. So that's some heavy-duty algebra. But don't worry about that because we're just right here now. Now the type of equation, this is back over on your previous page here. The relationship can be shown in the equation y equals kx. We got that given to you a little too early. So I just want you to, too many pens here. The equation is going to be in the form y equals kx. You just want to remember y equals kx. So we start off with that format, y equals kx, and then we already know what the k is. For this particular problem, it's 28. So all you have to do is substitute where that k was, that constant of proportionality, 28, and then you have y equals 28x, which means y is equal to 28 times whatever x is. And if you go back here and you look at your table, we had 28 as our common ratio, our common unit rate. That was also our multiplier. So the number of gallons multiplied by 28 each time comes out to the number of miles. So that's your multiplier. So looking up here, hopefully it's clear to you that the gallons, that would be your independent variable, and that the miles is your dependent variable. The miles driven depends on how many gallons of gas you have in your tank. So this is what you can control, and that's what comes from it. So if you look here, you've got the y value, the miles are equal to 28 times whatever your x value is, which is the gallons. We're just going to take that one step further and make it a little more real life, a little more obvious, because x and y, this goes back a couple of pages, it says down here that any variable can be a placeholder for the x and the y. So you can use any letter of the alphabet, and I like to use letters, you'll see this a lot when you're working on problems like this, they'll use letters that make sense to the problem. So if you're going to talk about gallons, G is a variable that makes more sense than x does at this point in time. And then miles driven, M would make more sense. So what we're doing is we're going to just turn this into an equation that uses the G for gallons and the M for miles. So instead of y is equal to 28x, 28's multiplying by whatever the gallons are, so we know that this is going to be G. So 28 times the gallons is equal to the miles. So it's still in the same format. It's got a variable equal to the constant of proportionality and then another variable. And all we did was change the y to a variable that made sense to this situation, miles, and we changed the x to a variable that made sense to this situation, which was gallons. And if you test that out, you can see that the miles are equal to 28 times whatever the gallons were.